An arrogant officer tried to shame a 19-year-old soldier, but a battle-hardened NCO silenced the room, exposed the truth, and lost everything to protect what was right. This story will break you. The formation was called for 800 sharp, but everyone knew what was coming. Word travels fast in a military unit, especially when it involves one of their own screwing up badly enough to warrant a public spectacle. Private First Class. Tommy Morrison stood at attention in the center of the courtyard, his uniform immaculate despite the circumstances. At 19, he was one of the youngest soldiers in Alpha Company, fresh-faced and eager in the way that made the older NCOs both protective and nostalgic for their own lost innocence. But today, Tommy looked like he wanted to disappear into the concrete beneath his boots. The entire company was arranged in formation around him, 200 soldiers standing in perfect ranks, all of them knowing they were about to witness either justice or humiliation, depending on your perspective. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison emerged from the headquarters building with the confident stride of a man who'd never doubted his own authority. At 42, he was young for his rank, ambitious, and possessed of the kind of pristine military record that looked impressive on paper, but lacked the weight of real experience. Behind him walked Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran whose weathered face told stories that Harrison's never could. Rodriguez had served multiple combat tours, had buried friends, had made the kind of life-and-death decisions that aged a man from the inside out. Rodriguez remembered Tommy Morrison's arrival 8 months ago. The kid had mentioned that his father had died in Iraq when Tommy was 12, and that joining the army was his way of honoring that sacrifice. "My dad always said the military takes care of its own," Tommy had told Rodriguez during their first counseling session. He said, "As long as you do the right thing and take care of your battle buddies, the army will take care of you." Now, watching Tommy stand at attention while facing public humiliation, those words came back with bitter irony. "Soldiers of Alpha Company," Harrison's voice carried clearly across the courtyard. "We're here today to address a serious breach of military discipline and honor." Tommy's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly, but he maintained his position of attention. Rodriguez noticed that the kid's hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of maintaining control. "Private First Class Morrison," Harrison continued, his voice taking on the theatrical tone of someone who enjoyed having an audience, "has been found guilty of theft. Specifically, stealing from his fellow soldiers, men and women who trusted him, who considered him family." A murmur rippled through the formation. Theft was serious in any context, but stealing from your own unit was considered one of the lowest forms of betrayal in military culture. "The evidence is clear and undeniable," Harrison announced. "Morrison was caught on security cameras removing money from Specialist Johnson's locker, $200 that Johnson had been saving to send home to his sick mother." Rodriguez's jaw tightened. He'd reviewed the security footage himself, and while it did show Tommy accessing Johnson's locker, there were significant gaps in the recording. For a supposedly thorough investigation, there seemed to be a lot of assumptions and very little actual proof. Tommy's face remained stoic, but those who knew him well could see the pain in his eyes. This wasn't the defiance of someone caught in wrongdoing. This was something else entirely. "What makes this crime particularly despicable," Harrison continued, "is the betrayal of trust it represents. Johnson trusted Morrison enough to share his locker combination. They were roommates, friends, and Morrison repaid that trust by stealing money intended to help a sick woman pay for her medical treatment." Rodriguez thought about Tommy and Johnson's relationship. Over the past few months, Rodriguez had noticed tension between them. Johnson had become increasingly secretive, staying out late, coming back smelling like alcohol. Tommy had seemed worried about his roommate, asking Rodriguez if there were resources available for soldiers dealing with personal problems. "This is not merely theft, it's a fundamental violation of everything we stand for as soldiers," Harrison declared, pacing dramatically. "We depend on each other. We trust each other with our lives. And when someone like Morrison betrays that trust, he betrays every one of us." Rodriguez felt his stomach turn. Harrison was using Tommy as an object lesson, turning a 19-year-old kid into a cautionary tale for the rest of the unit. Rodriguez remembered a conversation with Tommy 2 weeks ago. The kid had approached him after formation, looking troubled. "Master Sergeant," Tommy had said, "if you knew someone was making mistakes that could hurt their career, but they'd asked you not to tell anyone, what would you do? What if telling the truth would definitely ruin their life, but not telling it might ruin yours?" Now, with the context of the theft accusations, that conversation took on a much more ominous meaning. "Morrison," Harrison addressed the young soldier directly, Do you have anything to say in your defense? Any explanation for your actions? Tommy's mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked like he was wrestling with some internal decision, weighing options that all seemed equally impossible. No, sir, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. No? Harrison's eyebrows rose theatrically. No explanation? No excuse? No plea for mercy? No, sir. Rodriguez recognized the difference between guilt and resignation. Tommy wasn't denying the charges because he was guilty. He was accepting them because he believed he had no choice. Well then, let me explain to you, and to everyone present, the consequences of your actions. Harrison pulled out a document, making a show of reading from it. By order of this command, Private First Class Morrison is hereby reduced in rank to private. He will forfeit 2 months' pay, serve 30 days in the stockade, and upon completion of his confinement, will be processed for administrative separation from the United States Army with an other than honorable discharge. The punishment was devastating. An OTH discharge would follow Tommy for the rest of his life, making it difficult to find employment, impossible to receive veterans' benefits, and a permanent mark of shame. Furthermore, the colonel continued, his voice taking on a tone of righteous satisfaction, I want everyone here to understand what kind of person commits this sort of crime. Morrison didn't steal because he was desperate or hungry. He stole because he's weak, because he lacks the moral courage that defines a real soldier. Rodriguez felt his hands clench involuntarily. This was crossing a line from punishment into cruelty. Look at him. Harrison gestured dramatically toward Tommy. 19 years old and already a thief and a liar. What kind of man steals from his friends? What kind of soldier betrays the trust of his brothers in arms? Tommy's composure was beginning to crack. His breathing became shallow, and a muscle in his jaw twitched repeatedly. I've seen a lot of soldiers in my career, Harrison continued, but Morrison represents something particularly disappointing. He represents the failure of his generation. Young people who want the benefits of military service without accepting the responsibilities that come with it. That's when Rodriguez noticed Specialist Johnson standing in the rear rank of the formation. Johnson looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight, avoiding eye contact with anyone around him. But what really caught Rodriguez's attention was Johnson's body language. The specialist looked guilty, not satisfied that justice was being served, but guilty in the way someone looks when they're complicit in something wrong. Johnson kept glancing at Tommy, then looking away quickly, as if he couldn't bear to watch what was happening. His hands were clenched into fists, and Rodriguez could see sweat on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Rodriguez's 20 years of experience reading people kicked in. This wasn't the behavior of a victim watching his tormentor receive justice. This was the behavior of someone who knew an innocent person was being destroyed for his own mistakes. Morrison's actions have consequences beyond just the money he stole, Harrison was saying. He's damaged the trust and cohesion of this entire unit. Every one of you will now wonder if you can trust the soldier next to you. Sir, Rodriguez interrupted, his voice cutting through Harrison's speech like a blade. The courtyard fell silent. Interrupting a commanding officer during an official proceeding was a serious breach of protocol, potentially career-ending for an NCO. Harrison turned slowly, his face flushing with anger. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, you will wait until I've finished. With respect, sir, I believe there's something you need to know about this case. Master Sergeant, you are out of line. Return to your position immediately. Rodriguez took a step forward instead. Sir, I've been observing Specialist Johnson during this proceeding, and I believe there may be more to this situation than what's been presented. Harrison's face was now fully red. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, you will cease this disruption immediately, or you will face disciplinary action yourself. But Rodriguez was already moving, walking directly toward where Johnson stood in formation. The specialist's eyes went wide as the senior NCO approached. Specialist Johnson, Rodriguez called out loudly enough for the entire formation to hear. Would you please step forward? Master Sergeant Rodriguez, Harrison's voice cracked like a whip. I order you to return to your position. Rodriguez ignored him, keeping his eyes fixed on Johnson. Come on, son, step forward. Johnson looked around desperately, but surrounded by 200 soldiers in formation, there was nowhere to go. Reluctantly, he stepped out of rank and moved toward the center of the courtyard. Master Sergeant, you are relieved of duty, Harrison announced. Report to my office immediately for disciplinary action. Rodriguez finally turned to face the colonel, his weathered face calm but determined. Sir, before you relieve me, I think this formation deserves to hear the truth about what really happened. The truth has already been established through a proper investigation. No, sir, it hasn't. Rodriguez's voice carried the authority of 2 decades of military service. The truth is that Specialist Johnson has been having a gambling problem for the past 6 months. He's been losing money in poker games off base, and he's been borrowing from other soldiers to cover his debts. Johnson went pale. And, Master Sergeant, that's not... The truth is, Rodriguez continued, his voice growing louder, that Johnson asked Morrison to help him get money from his own locker because he was too ashamed to admit to his roommate that he'd lost his mother's medical money in a card game. The formation was dead silent now, every soldier straining to hear what was being revealed. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, Harrison's voice was dangerous now, you will cease this unauthorized... The truth is, Rodriguez pressed on, that Morrison didn't steal anything. He was helping a friend retrieve his own money because Johnson was too drunk and too ashamed to do it himself. And when you needed someone to blame for Johnson's missing money, Morrison chose to take the fall rather than expose his friend's gambling addiction. Tommy's composure finally broke. He closed his eyes tightly, his shoulders shaking slightly as the weight of the truth settled over the formation. That's enough, Harrison roared. Security! Place Master Sergeant Rodriguez under arrest. But the damage was done. Rodriguez turned to address the formation directly. Look at this boy, he said, gesturing toward Tommy. 19 years old, and he was willing to destroy his own career, his own future, to protect a friend's secret. That's not the action of a thief or a coward. That's the action of a soldier who understands loyalty better than most of us ever will. 2 military police officers were moving toward Rodriguez now, but he kept talking. This kid's father died serving his country. Tommy joined the army to honor that sacrifice, to be the kind of soldier his father was. And when his roommate needed help, when Johnson was drowning in gambling debts, Tommy stepped up. He didn't judge, didn't lecture, he just helped. Specialist Johnson, Rodriguez called out. Tell this formation what really happened. Don't let an innocent man take the fall for your mistakes. Johnson was crying now, tears streaming down his face. The weight of watching an innocent man be destroyed for his mistakes was too much to bear. It's true, Johnson said, his voice breaking. It's all true. Tommy didn't steal anything. I lost the money gambling, and I was too ashamed to admit it. When my sergeant asked what happened to the money, I panicked and said it had been stolen. Tommy knew I was lying, but he said he'd take responsibility rather than let me get in trouble for gambling. The revelation hit the formation like a physical blow. Soldiers looked at each other, at Tommy, at Johnson, trying to process what they'd just learned. Harrison was furious, but he was also trapped. The truth was out, witnessed by 200 soldiers. This is highly irregular, he began, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Rodriguez was handcuffed now, but he continued speaking as the MPs led him away. Colonel Harrison, he called out. That boy was willing to sacrifice everything to protect a friend. That's the kind of soldier I'd want next to me in combat. That's the kind of character that makes a real leader. As Rodriguez was led away, Tommy finally spoke up. Sir, he addressed Harrison, his voice stronger now. Master Sergeant Rodriguez is right. I didn't steal anything. I was helping Johnson, and when the investigation started, I thought it would be easier for everyone if I just took responsibility. I didn't want Johnson to lose his career over a mistake. This formation is dismissed, Harrison announced abruptly. All parties will report to my office for further discussion. But the real resolution came later, away from the public eye. Rodriguez was charged with insubordination, conduct unbecoming an NCO, and disruption of official proceedings. Despite his 20 years of exemplary service, despite multiple combat decorations, the charges stuck. He was reduced in rank to staff sergeant, forfeited a month's pay, and was transferred to a different unit. More significantly, the incident effectively ended his chances for further promotion. At 38 years old, Rodriguez's military career was essentially over. The transfer was to a remote logistics unit, processing supplies in warehouses, a far cry from the combat leadership positions he'd excelled in for years. It was a clear message: speak out against your superiors, and you'll finish your career in obscurity. Tommy was quietly exonerated of all charges. Johnson's gambling problem was addressed through counseling, and the whole incident was officially classified as a misunderstanding. But the damage to Rodriguez was irreversible. His wife Maria took the news better than he'd expected. You did the right thing, she told him the night he came home from his disciplinary hearing. That boy's life was worth more than your career. But Rodriguez could see the strain in her eyes. Between her nursing salary and his reduced military pay, they could make ends meet. But their plans for retirement, for their children's college educations. All of that had to be reconsidered. Their teenage daughter, Sophia, was furious. "It's not fair, Dad. You're a hero, and they're treating you like a criminal." Rodriguez had tried to explain the complexities of military hierarchy, but Sophia wasn't buying it. "You saved an innocent person. How is that wrong?" 6 months later, Rodriguez retired from the army rather than face serving out his remaining years as a junior NCO. He found work as a security guard at a shopping mall, earning a fraction of his military salary. The job was monotonous: walking patrols, checking locks, dealing with shoplifters. After 20 years of leading soldiers in dangerous places, managing mall security felt like a cruel joke. But Rodriguez discovered something unexpected in his new role. Young employees at the mall began seeking him out for advice. They recognized something in him: an authority, a wisdom, a genuine care for others that transcended his uniform. "Mr. Rodriguez," one teenage worker told him, "you're different from other adults. You actually listen when we talk." Rodriguez began mentoring these young people, helping them navigate workplace conflicts, personal problems, educational decisions. In a way, he was still serving, still protecting and developing the next generation. Tommy, meanwhile, went on to have a distinguished military career. He was promoted ahead of his peers, earned multiple commendations, and eventually became an NCO himself. But he never forgot the man who had sacrificed everything to protect him. Every year on the anniversary of that formation, Tommy would call Rodriguez. They'd talk for hours about leadership, about sacrifice, about the difference between doing what's easy and doing what's right. "I could never repay what you did for me," Tommy told him during one of these calls. "You don't need to repay it," Rodriguez replied. "You just need to pass it forward. When you see someone in trouble, when you have the power to help them, remember what happened in that courtyard. Remember that sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, and sometimes that's exactly what makes it right." Tommy took that lesson to heart. As he rose through the ranks, he became known as an NCO who protected his soldiers, who fought for them even when it was difficult. When Tommy was promoted to Master Sergeant himself, he chose to work with new recruits, training the next generation of soldiers, instilling in them the same values that Rodriguez had demonstrated. "Leadership isn't about rank," Tommy would tell his trainees. "It's about character. It's about being willing to sacrifice yourself to protect what's right, even when no one's watching, even when you'll be punished for it." Years later, when Tommy was nearing retirement, he received a letter from Rodriguez's daughter, Sophia, who had become a lawyer specializing in military justice. "I wanted you to know," she wrote, "that my father never regretted what he did that day. Even when things got hard, even when the bills were difficult to pay, even when people asked him if it was worth it, he never regretted standing up for you. He used to say that real leaders aren't the ones who get promoted or receive awards. Real leaders are the ones who do what's right when it matters, regardless of the personal cost." The letter continued, "I went to law school because of what happened to my father. I wanted to make sure that good people like him had someone to fight for them when the system failed. I've dedicated my career to defending soldiers who find themselves in impossible situations." Tommy kept that letter for the rest of his life, a reminder of the ripple effects of Rodriguez's sacrifice. In his final years, Rodriguez worked as a counselor at a veterans center, helping other former soldiers transition to civilian life. Many had left the military under difficult circumstances: medical discharges, administrative separations, early retirements that hadn't been entirely voluntary. "The military gives you a sense of purpose, of belonging," Rodriguez would tell them. "When that's taken away, you feel lost. But your value as a person isn't determined by your rank or discharge status. It's determined by how you treat others, how you stand up for what's right." Rodriguez never regretted his decision. In interviews years later, he would say that watching an innocent kid get destroyed for someone else's mistake wasn't something he could live with. "I had 20 years in," he would explain. "I had rank, experience, decorations. Tommy Morrison had nothing but his integrity. When I saw someone trying to take that away from him for no good reason, I couldn't stay silent." "But you lost everything," interviewers would point out. Rodriguez would smile sadly. "I lost a career. Tommy would have lost his soul. That's not even close to a fair trade." The story of what happened in that courtyard became legend in military circles, a reminder that sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, and sometimes that's exactly what makes it right. Master Sergeant Rodriguez had silenced a room full of soldiers, not with authority or rank, but with truth. He had exposed corruption and protected an innocent young man, knowing it would destroy his own future. He had lost everything to protect what was right, and in doing so, He had proven what real leadership looks like, the kind that transcends rank, survives disgrace, and inspires others long after the person who demonstrated it has moved on. Tommy Morrison went on to become the kind of NCO that Rodriguez had been, the kind who protects their soldiers even when it's hard, even when it's costly, even when nobody's watching, because he had learned from a master who understood that some things are worth more than careers, more than rank, more than anything except the knowledge that you stood up when it mattered. That's the kind of story that breaks you, not because it's tragic, but because it's beautiful, because it reminds you that heroes don't always win. Sometimes they just do what's right and pay the price, and sometimes that's enough.